morning. I've been reading through the Psalms a good bit the last several weeks, and I've been reminded over and over again, they truly do mirror the human soul. Every emotion that we're capable of having, you'll find it in the Psalms. Joy to sorrow, tragedy to peace. They're all there in the Psalms. And a prime example of this fact, the mirroring of the human soul, is Psalm 73. If you would, look with me at Psalm 73 this morning. We'll be studying from that psalm. And two major observations made by Asaph in this psalm. Notice how Asaph begins the psalm. Verse 1, surely God is good to Israel, to those who are pure in heart. And so Asaph states his conclusion of the theme he's chosen from the very beginning. God is good to Israel. And that's what we're used to hearing. That's what we're used to reading in the Psalms, are these statements of deep faith and abiding trust in the Lord. But Psalm 73 is unique among the Psalms. And the more I think about Psalm 73 and the teaching of Asaph here, the more I realize that this should be really a part of regular teaching, and certainly parents teaching to children, so that when they grow up, they can come back to this psalm and remember these two overriding thoughts in response to Asaph's difficult time period of life, we'll call it. It's unique in that Asaph didn't always feel the way he expresses in verse 1. In fact, there was a time in which Asaph nearly fell away from the Lord. Look at this in verse 2. As for me, my feet came close to stumbling, and my steps had almost slipped. So what was the problem? Look at verse 3. For I was envious of the arrogant as I saw the prosperity of the wicked. And so the problem with Asaph, having even these thoughts of turning away from the Lord and going back to a life of sin, he says, rested in this particular sin of envy. The problem was not that he looked over the sea of humanity and saw God's people healthy, wealthy, and living trouble-free lives. And then when he looked out over the sea of humanity, he saw the ungodly and the wicked, and they were wretched and miserable as a result of their sinful choices, weighed down with shame and guilt and looking for a way out of their wretchedness. That's not what Asaph saw. And it's not what we see as a rule. Though I think sometimes we probably think that's what we should see. So again, what was the problem? And Asaph said the problem was, I started envying the wicked. He had walked into one of Satan's oldest, most deceptive traps, envy of the wicked. Asaph looked at the unbelieving world around him, and he saw people living their wicked, selfish, carefree lives, and he thought, why can't my life be like that? These people don't fear God. They blaspheme God's name daily. They live shameful, immoral lives. They hold nothing sacred. And yet their lives seem to be trouble-free. And seem is a critical word there. here I am. I'm trying my level best to serve the Lord and keep a clean conscience before God. And yet my life is full of trouble. I'm struggling here, Lord. And then in verses 4 through 14, Asaph describes in detail his very superficial, subjective assessment of the people around him. Let's look at it. Verse 4. Keep in mind, this is him relying on his own perception, walking by sight and not by faith. Verse 4, there are no pains in their death. Their body is fat. They're not in trouble as other men. They're not plagued like mankind. Therefore, pride is their necklace. The garment of violence covers them. Contrary to the thinking of many, wicked people sometimes live long, prosperous lives. They have nice homes. They have nice clothing. They have a lot of nice things. And they just want more. They don't care who they hurt to have it. And they're arrogant about it. They'll flaunt all of these nice things they have like a gaudy necklace. Asaph continues, verse 7, their eye bulges from fatness. The imaginations of their heart run riot. Always thinking of ways to have more at your expense if necessary. Verse 8, they mock and wickedly speak of oppression. They speak from on high. They've set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue parades through the earth. And so he observes that nothing escapes their mockery, and no one, not even God, escapes their blasphemous tongue. They're constantly irreverent of God. And then in verse 10, he tells us this is one of the great tragedies that comes out of that, and he was almost one of those individuals. He said, therefore, his people, and I believe he's talking about God's people. God's people return to this place that is a life of sin because of this particular deception of envy. Envying these people and thinking, we're missing out. That's the good life right there. Why can't I live that way? And so their thought continues, waters of abundance are drunk by them. And they say, here's their reasoning, how does God know? And is there knowledge with the Most High? And so their reason is evidently the wicked are prospering and the righteous are suffering. Where's the justice of God? God does not know. Maybe God doesn't care. Verse 12, these are the wicked. Always at ease, they've increased their wealth. Surely in vain, I have kept my heart pure and washed my hands in innocence. For I have been stricken all day long and chastened every morning. And so, where is the justice of God? Where is the reward of the righteous? Verse 15 is one reason Asaph put the brakes on this kind of thinking. Look at this. If I had said, I'll speak thus, in other words, I'll broadcast my feelings to other people. He said, behold, I would have betrayed the generation of your children. When I pondered to understand this, it was troublesome in my sight. This was more than an enigma to him. He truly almost turned away from the Lord. And then in verse 17, we find a major turning point in Asaph's thinking. He said, this is the way I was thinking until I came into the sanctuary of God. And then I perceived their end. Surely you set them in slippery places. How they are destroyed in a moment. They are utterly swept away by sudden terrors. Like a dream when one awakens. O Lord, when aroused, you will despise their form. And so at some point in this thinking process of doubt, Asaph made a very wise decision. Asaph realized that surely there is another side to this. There always is. God's side. And instead of listening to his own heart and following his own feelings, Asaph started listening to God. Now, this is what he means when he says in verse 17, I came into the sanctuary of God. And when Asaph sought the word of the Lord, he started walking by faith once again, instead of by his own perception and sight. There were two very sobering truths that he came to, conclusions that he came to. And so this morning, the remainder of our lesson, let's see if we can profit from the two very important truths that Asaph came to in response to his former thinking. Verse 17, I perceived therein. Like a man suddenly awakened from sleep before he drives off a cliff, Asaph was suddenly awakened from one of Satan's most deceptive dreams, and that is no accountability. Man is commonly fooled into thinking that somehow he can go through this life making these marvelous moral choices of good and bad and right and wrong, mercy or no mercy, kind or not be kind, serve myself or serve other people. And in the end, he won't have to give an account of those choices. No consequences for his choices. Man is constantly looking for a way to avoid accountability. He's constantly fooled into thinking that somehow he can get away with all of these marvelous, these ability to make marvelous choices in life. Well, Asaph would say, that's a fool's dream. Stop lying to yourself. You know that will never happen. In verse 18, he says, thou dost set them in slippery places. We all know that with one wrong move by them or someone else's foolish decision, it's not always our decision. It may be somebody else's decision. Life is over. Verse 19, they are destroyed in a moment, utterly swept away by sudden terrors. And along that line, where now are all those wicked people Asaph envied in his generation? Where are they? Well, the answer is in Psalm chapter 9, verse 17, where the psalmist answers, the wicked will return to Sheol, even all the nations that forget God. And then in Job chapter 8, verse 13, so are the paths of all who forget God, and the hope of the godless will perish, whose confidence is fragile. The confidence of people of the world is fragile. Their trust, he says, is a spider's web. We watch that little spider spin this intricate, marvelous little web all night long, thinking he has security, but we also know that with one quick whisk of the broom, his security is gone. And Job says that's the security of the wicked. In a moment, it's gone. And so Asaph wisely looked ahead beyond the horizon of the mundane, and he remembered the end of earthly life. It is appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. All men must face the judgment of God. And it's good to remember that ourselves, and it's good to remind our fellow men of that fact. Have you thought about what happens after death? Is your soul ready for that? Secondly, in verse 15, we see another very wise decision on the part of Asaph. He said, if I had said I will speak thus, I would have betrayed the generation of my children. Asaph wisely recognized the tremendous gravity of this situation. It was not only his soul, but the souls of many, many others that was at stake, including his own family members, his spouse, children, grandchildren. Nadab and Abihu, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, Ananias and Sapphira. People are seldom lost alone. If we become so deceived by sin that we turn away from God and back to a life of sin, in all probability, there will be a number of people, including our own family, that will eventually follow us on that path. And as Asaph pondered this, it was weighty to him. And he determined that he would not be a stumbling block to anybody in his family. And so as Asaph, if we ever have thoughts like this in the midst of some trial, and it seems to us that the wicked seem to be prospering and the righteous are suffering, and where's the reward of the righteous? We're thinking too much on a horizontal plane and not enough beyond into eternity. Please remember the path that you're on and you choose to walk on, other people will follow behind you. And children, grandchildren, those very vulnerable, those who look to you as a role model, they will likely follow your path. The lambs will follow the sheep, you know, wherever the sheep may stray. When the sheep go wrong, it won't be long till the lambs are as strong as they. One of the biggest downfalls of a young man or a young lady is they simply do not look ahead at the consequences beyond the choices. Well, many adults are just as bad. It's sad enough that a man would turn his back on the Lord, but the saddest fact of all is that we're building a road over which others, younger, less experienced, will travel right behind us. As Asaph concludes his thoughts in Psalm 73, there in verse 25, you see a renewed resolve on his part to trust in the Lord and live the remainder of his days in service to him. He says this, "Whom have I in heaven but thee? And besides thee, I desire nothing on earth. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." And so he concludes that whatever happens to me in my body and my health, if I don't have any food, God is my portion. He is my strength. He is the one I will look to. He's my dweller. In verse 27, "Behold, those who are far from him will perish. Thou hast destroyed all those who are unfaithful to thee. As for me, the nearness of God is my good." Again, that's my portion. God's fellowship. "I've made the Lord God my refuge, that I may tell of all thy works." People sometimes say to me, "Dempsey, cut to the chase. Give me the bottom line." Well, here's the ultimate bottom line. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. God will bring every work into judgment, every secret thing, good or bad. Ecclesiastes 12:13. Here's another version of that, which I really like. "Well, all has been heard, and life is quickly passing. Here is the conclusion to life's purpose. Stand in awe of God continually and obey his commandments. This is life's purpose. It is everything for every man. For God will bring every act into judgment, including the secret things, good or evil. We must give an account unto God." And so God has a solution for this crazy, mixed up world. It's called judgment. All wrongs will be righted, all injustices made just, every crooked thing will be straightened, all human thoughts brought to light. And so don't envy the wicked, pity the wicked, because someday and someday soon they will want to trade places with you, unless we can save them. And we need to be praying and working toward that. And to do that, we need to stay strong. We need to stay home, spiritually speaking. I've often wondered why it is that Psalm 73 is in the Psalter. Here's a man, a servant of God, and he's obviously expressing doubts about God. He's saying, I almost didn't believe in you anymore. I almost turned my back on you. Why would God allow one of his servants, and Asaph writes a number of psalms, why would he allow his servant Asaph to put that in the Psalter? God obviously has a very important reason for that. Years ago, C.S. Lewis wrote a series of essays. And they were essays on evidences for God. That was his forte. Evidences, reasoning concerning the reasons for God. And he called these essays God in the Dock. In Old English, a dock is where you put a prisoner when he's on trial. It's kind of a fenced-in structure. And while the judge and the advocates, one way or the other, discuss and speak and present evidence, the person in the dock is not allowed to speak. He's on trial. And what Lewis was suggesting was that here we are as human beings. And as we reason, and he's the one presenting the reasonings, and as we reason and as we discuss and as we muse about the evidences for God, here's another trial, and let me think about whether or not I believe again. I go through the process again. And going through the process of musing and reasoning and thinking all over again and discussing, we've got God in the dock. And we don't really allow him to say much. We just, we're still thinking about this, God. And once again, this trial came up and we're reasoning about this again, trying to decide if we believe this or believe that. Do we want to think this way or that way? Will we be committed to you or not? But just wait and we'll come to a decision on that. And Lewis makes the point that God is never on trial. We think he is. We act sometimes like God is on trial. We are on trial. We're always the one who's on trial. There's only one judge, and that's Jesus Christ. And so let's realize that if we don't make that commitment, wholeheartedly, fully devoting ourselves to the Lord, like Joshua, that statement in chapter 24:15, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord wholeheartedly, completely. Then we have no excuses because we're the ones that are on trial. God is the judge, and he will judge someday. All men must give account to God. And think about those who follow behind you. Think about the people all around you. You may be envying. Someday they're going to be judged too. You want to be in their position. Life is short. It is very short. And in the short time, Dean and I will be with you here, teaching. It's good that we remind one another that life is soon going to be over. Latest stats are in. 1 out of 1 people die. Are you ready for that time? Whatever the trial may be right here, remember, heaven is coming. And it's worth it all. Or nothing is worth anything. Think about these things as we stand and sing the song select.